All right, everyone, welcome back to Algebra 1. Today we are going to be doing 3 questions plus an extension, and by the end of today you will be able to solve equations using the quadratic formula. We've already looked at the quadratic formula, but we want to be able to go ahead and solve these equations, all right? So for our warm-up today, it asks us to identify values of A, B, and C. You've already been doing this before when we are factoring, when we were completing the square. So all we want to go ahead and do is identify A, B, and C. As you can see, our equation is not equal to 0, so we have to go ahead and set that equal to 0 first. In order to do so, we're going to subtract 12 from both sides. Because we're subtracting only 12, then we have to go ahead and combine it with our like term, which is 3. So we're going to go ahead and subtract 12 from 12, which is 0. And we are going to go ahead and subtract 3 from 12, which gives us negative 9. And since we don't have any like terms to combine these with, we are just going to go ahead and bring them down, all right? So we are left with 2x squared plus 7x minus 9 is equal to 0. All right, so we want to identify our values of A, B, and C. So our A value is the coefficient in front of x squared. Our B value is our coefficient in front of x. And our C value is this term right here, negative 9. So we're going to go ahead and figure out that A is 2, B is 7, and C is negative 9. We're going to be able to go ahead and take these values and plug it into our quadratic formula. So I want you guys to solve using the quadratic equation, all right? Do you remember what the quadratic equation is? I'll give you a moment to go ahead and write it down. All right, so you should have negative x is equal to negative b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and identify our a, b, and c values. But if you notice, we don't have this equation set to 0. So we're going to go ahead and do that first. That's always our first step. So we're going to go ahead and subtract 20, because what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. And we're going to go ahead and subtract 20 from 20, which will give us our 0. And since we don't have any like terms here, we're just going to go ahead and bring them down and put them in order of a quadratic formula, of a quadratic equation. So we're going to go ahead and put x squared minus 8x, we're just dropping everything down, minus 20 is equal to 0. You should have this already. You should have this ready. So you should go have this. Next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and identify our A, B, and C values, because if you notice, if we're going to plug it into this quadratic formula, we have to go ahead and know which one our B, our A, and our C is. So we're going to go ahead and identify the coefficient in front of x squared is A, the coefficient in front of x is B, but we also have to take into consideration the sign in front of that number. And this is going to be our C value. So we also have to make sure that we take in consideration that negative 20. So if we plug these numbers into our quadratic formula, we're going to be left with x is equal to negative 8, because we have to make sure that we're putting that sign into consideration with our 8. Plus or minus, we got to include that radical as well. Then we got b squared, so we're going to do negative 8 squared minus 4. Our a value is the coefficient in front of x squared, which is always 1, right? 1. And then our c value, which is negative 20. Again, we got to make sure we take in our negative signs into consideration. And this is going to be all over 2 times our a value, which is 1. So we have this whole equation here. So I'm going to give you guys a second to go ahead and solve this, all right? Try to go ahead and... So you're going to be left with this. So I'm going to give you guys a second to tell me how we're going to go ahead and solve this. All right, so then we're left with this. So we're going to go ahead and solve this, all right? I am going to do this on a separate piece of paper. All right, so we are going to go ahead and solve this on a separate piece of paper because I am running out of room. You always want to make sure that you have the appropriate room to solve an equation. So we're going to go ahead and use our order of operations in order to solve this. So we're going to go ahead and do negative times negative 8 is going to give us a positive 8 plus or minus we're going to do everything under the radical. So the first thing we're going to do is take negative 8 squared, which is 64. And we're going to keep that negative in there, right? We're just going to bring it down. We're going to do 4 times 1, which is 4. And then we're going to multiply that by negative 20, all right? All over 2 times 1 is 2. We still have one more thing we have to do here. We're going to bring everything else down. We have to go ahead and multiply that negative 4 times negative 20. Negative 4 times negative 20 is positive 80. And then we're going to go ahead and divide that by 2. Next step is we want to do everything underneath that radical. So we're going to do 64 plus 80, which should give you 144 all over 2. Okay, we're just literally following the steps as we go. We're left with x is equal to 8 plus or minus. We got to figure out what's under that radical, right? What's the square root of 144? We're left with 12, right? We're going to divide both those numbers by 2. All right, so from here, we're going to go ahead and divide 2 from 8 and 2 from 12, right? So we're going to go ahead and do 8 divided by 2, which is 4. We're going to keep those plus and minus signs, and then we're going to divide 2 from 12, which is 6. And from here, we're going to have to do both of these symbols. We're going to have to both add and subtract 4 from 6. So if we add 6 to 4, we're left with 10. And if we also subtract 4 minus 6, we're left with negative 2. So the way we write this is the same way we've been writing it down with our x values, our zeros. We're going to go ahead and put them in the little bracket, the squiggly bracket. We're going to go ahead and put negative 2 and 10. And that is your answer. You have solved the quadratic equation by using the quadratic formula. And then I want you guys to go ahead and try on your own. Go ahead and try to solve negative x squared minus 10x minus 21 is equal to 0 by using the quadratic formula. So go ahead and take some time right now. Take into considerations your a's, your b, and your c value. So you should have something that looks like this with the quadratic formula and everything plugged in, your a's, b's, and c's values. And if you go ahead and follow the steps that we did before, you can go ahead and see that right here on our second step, we cannot take the square root of 184. So we're just going to go ahead and simplify it. It is going to be an irrational solution. So when we simplified it into radical 46. And then we took the same steps. We divided our negative 2 by 10 and our negative 2 by 2. So we were left with negative 5 plus or minus radical 46. And then we're going to go ahead and add and subtract both of those values. So we were left with x is equal to, curly bracket, negative 5 plus radical 46 and negative 5 minus radical 46 because we cannot do anything. All right, so for next class, I want you guys to think about what method is best to solve this quadratic equation. 9x squared minus 4 is equal to 0. We've already talked about the square root. We've talked about completing the square and the quadratic formula. So go ahead and think about what you would use best to solve this because it might not be what you think it is. And I'll see you guys next class.